Well, folks, in a previous message, we were talking about the shooting that took place in Florida, discussing how that the deputy Peterson was being called a coward, and he was only following protocol. I had no idea that this information was already out there, and it's in the news. But for the most part, it's being covered up. But on this website, Real Clear Politics, they go into a lot of the area that I was dealing with. And again, I saw this information after the fact. So I didn't even know about this information being out there. And being led by the Holy Spirit, I spoke what the Lord gave me to speak. I had no idea that this was even out there. So here's the confirmation of what we had already shared with you. And that is, it's now coming out, and people are asking the question, how come the sheriff that was calling his deputy a coward, how come he didn't discipline him? And why did he give him pay and retirement, which a severance, or however that works, as far as he's being given, a paycheck in retirement? And that doesn't sound like to me that's discipline. So as I was looking in this article, I found that there was someone here that actually was saying the same thing, asking the same questions that I'm asking myself. And that is, why didn't the other four of the sheriff department, why didn't they go in to the building when they arrived? But see, that's not being talked about. The only thing you hear about is about Peterson. But what's even more shocking is when reporters tried to go out to Peterson's home to get a story from him, 6 police officers are outside of his home. And they said they were there to protect him. Well, that's not really what they were there for. They're there to keep the reporters from getting to him. And so now he's retired and more than likely out of the country. But there's a huge cover-up right now, even with the surveillance tapes. Why aren't they making the surveillance tapes public? Why is that information of the communication between Peterson and the sheriff department being withheld? These are questions that we demand answers for. We, the people, demand answers. But this is a total blackout, and this is a total cover-up. This is corruption, folks. No mistake about it. This is corruption. Now, I'm not saying that, the whole thing was a false flag as far as there were crisis actors. These kids didn't die. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, could this have been a play of the NRA to get more guns into the schools and into the hands of teachers and to sell more guns? Think about that. But why is it that Israel is being so hard on Peterson when all Peterson was doing was following protocol? He was not supposed to go into that building by himself. That everyone knows police protocol is you wait for backup. You don't go in, charge in by yourself. Because there's a lot of police out there that have a mentality that they want to be the hero. And that can be more dangerous than an officer that stands down and waits. A lot of very dangerous things can happen when, you get a hothead policeman or sheriff or deputy or whatever that has a hot head that wants to get a name for themselves And so this is something that the police and that the sheriff department and probably even in the military, for the most part, has implemented into protocol because they want to stop hotheads, right? They want to stop officers from operating as an island unto themselves. They want them to work as a unit. And again, I ask the question, why were the other four that were, now remember this, nobody would have showed up at the school. The sheriff department never would have been there. Those four men would have never been there with guns in hand, hadn't it not been for Peterson calling it in. Okay? So why isn't Peterson being looked at as a hero for calling in the sheriff department? Okay? Why isn't he being, looked on or smiled on for that? Why isn't he being praised for that? Instead, they're calling him a coward. And then you hear Donald Trump also saying pretty much that this Peterson failed, and even says the sheriff department failed because this guy was no more than a security officer on duty. Well, my question is, why did those other four men not go into the building? What were they waiting for? What were they waiting for? Did they receive orders to stand down? And that's exactly what it says in this article. We don't have any access to the communication between the sheriff department and Peterson, between the other officers. There's no footage of the surveillance tapes, and I don't see anybody demanding that information. I don't see any of the students demanding that information, and all the protesting they're doing, trying to get guns, a ban on the AR-15, and all that they're doing right now, trying to fight against guns and the Second Amendment. Listen, folks, there's nobody, hardly anybody, if anybody, mentioning why those other four men did not go into the building. That's the big question. In my opinion, that's the elephant in the room. That is the elephant in the room. And then the other thing that we need to look at, last thing I want to say, the other thing we need to look at is why were 6 police stationed outside Peterson's home? And nobody could get to him. Nobody could talk to him. And it makes you wonder if Peterson's going to come up missing. Possibly. Or they gave him his severance, they gave him his retirement, and he's happy with that, and he's not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole, and he's all done. And he's just going to stay out of it. But there's definitely a cover-up here. No question about it that there is a cover-up, folks. So I'm going to leave a link of this article if you'd like to read it for yourself. But this, in my opinion, these are the questions that should be being asked about this shooting in Florida.